2024 may legitimately end up being one of the busiest years for Bethesda ever. If recent leaks are to be believed, a new event may just be weeks away. It's incredibly likely that we see Bethesda do something that they've simply never done before, as I think there's a pretty good chance we start to see and maybe even play the Oblivion remaster in 2024. And the story behind this one is pretty insane in its own right. In July of 2023, a random user took to Reddit to supposedly leak several projects coming from ZOS Games. ZOS Games is a giant studio that basically helps other developers make their games. Reportedly, one project underway at the Paris branch of ZOS was Alter. This is going to be a remaster/remake of Oblivion. The discussion for it being a full remake are still ongoing. It is done currently using a pairing system, so it means that the remaster is running using both a UE5 project and the old Oblivion one. For instance, new graphics are rendered in the UE5 project, but most of the gameplay, physics, etc. is still done in Oblivion. It should be released end of next year/early 25, depending mostly on if it's a remake or remaster. So now, first glance, a lot of users saw this new dual engine system mentioned and thought, whoa, no, that is just ridiculous. But other remakes have been taking advantage of such a system, like Shadow of the Colossus. And using two engines to remake a game like Oblivion can be incredibly powerful. Oblivion would basically use UE5 for the visuals and other modernizations. Some fans of the games have already recreated aspects of Oblivion in Unreal Engine 5, and you could just easily see how much better things look here. But underneath that visual upgrade, it'll be the original Gamebryo engine. So as you play, things will feel remarkably similar to Oblivion despite looking way better. And then from there, the developers can selectively pick which features to remake in Unreal Engine 5 versus which to leave in the older state on Gamebryo. So this actually makes a lot more sense than you may think. But over time, this leak got increasingly more interesting. This user ended up deleting their account almost immediately, but first provided proof to moderators of the Gaming Leak subreddit, who said this person's identity has been verified with us, specifically their claim of being an ex-employee of ZOS. And at the time, I reached out to the moderators of this subreddit who confirmed that they received identifying information that was able to be paired with online information to make it seem very likely that this user could have known this information about the Oblivion remake. And even Nate Drake, another insider who has correctly leaked several things like the recent Persona 3 remake on Xbox, backed up this leak saying they heard an Oblivion remaster was being shopped around but weren't sure where it landed. So as a result of all of that, an outlandish leak being posted, but then over time it becoming more and more plausible, this little Reddit post ended up getting a ton of coverage in the media. But just a few short months later, things would be upgraded to an even new level, as Xbox effectively confirmed this leak with an additional leak of their own. Microsoft accidentally uploaded a ton of internal and private documents while trying to upload a Phil Spencer deposition during the FTC trial earlier this year. One such document that was accidentally uploaded was this Bethesda roadmap. This was made in July of 2020 while Bethesda and Microsoft were negotiating the Bethesda buyout. And on this roadmap from Bethesda, we could see an Oblivion remaster listed as one of their plans, and actually at this point it would be relatively near release. So this all could be one gigantic coincidence, but to me it seems incredibly likely that this leak was real, as we're now seeing sources from both 2023 and 2020 about some kind of Oblivion remaster or remake coming. And where this all becomes particularly relevant for this video is the timing. In that original leaked post, it was described how this remaster was slated for late 2024 or early 2025, and if you look at this release schedule, that lines up super well. As mentioned before, this roadmap was made in July of 2020. Of course, the pandemic led to tons of delays for a lot of these projects, but what you will still notice is all of the content from fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 21 is now released, with Starfield being the last major holdout. And we already have heard how we're going to be hearing more about Indiana Jones later this year, as well as the Starfield DLC, and then sitting just in between those is the Oblivion remaster. So it seems like the Oblivion remaster will be ripe for an announcement or even potential release in 2024, based not only on some random Reddit leaks that were later backed up, but also Bethesda's own roadmap, assuming they actually stuck to these timelines. And frankly, I could see this being one of the giant reveals at the Xbox Summer Showcase, and even if the remaster or remake gets pushed until 2025, if it's in the first half of next year, I could still see it getting revealed this summer, so there's a pretty good chance we play a actual remaster from Bethesda in 2024, and not like one of those haphazard remasters, but a real one. And this will definitely be one of those things to keep an eye on even at a macro level. Bethesda also had plans for a Fallout 3 remaster later on in their roadmap, and I imagine the performance of this Oblivion remaster will have a large impact on how they handle these things going forward. If the Oblivion remaster just ends up selling ridiculous amounts of copies and makes them a ton of money, you have to imagine they'll start popping these things out quite a bit more frequently. And the recent addition of paid mods to Skyrim, and likely coming to Starfield in not that long, could be an interesting X factor here. Adding this creation system to something like an Oblivion or Fallout 3 remaster adds in a serious avenue for new revenue generation. You can make a lot of money selling paid mods for your older games that just never got to the same level of modability as some of the more modern ones. Now, I'm not saying I would personally like to see that done, but from a business and financial perspective, you have to imagine Xbox and Bethesda are considering that. But speaking of, I could also see this paid mod system having some interesting impacts on Skyrim in 2024, like potentially even getting some of you to give Skyrim another go. As of right now, we haven't seen any new paid mods release outside of that initial batch, but Bethesda seemingly has received tons of applications to this program, and they have mentioned how things will begin gradually, but over time, waves of new verified creators, as they are known, will be added to the program. And even further, Bethesda has described that they'll be even updating and creating new tools for this, like a Blender exporter. So when it comes to creations, it feels like this weird scenario where Bethesda almost just kind of dumped it out before the holiday. Further updates to the program have been slow, but they still do have grand plans for all of this in 2024. I don't think it's going to be this year where we really get to see what's possible here. Some mod authors like Kingath plan on creating full-fledged experiences for Skyrim using this system, and as the program adds more and more new mod authors, they may create larger and larger additions to creations. So could we actually see a point in 2024 where there are paid mods releasing for Skyrim that are actually worth the money? Obviously, we have no idea, but it's just another one of those things that I feel like a lot of people saw, had a reaction to, and immediately forgot about, but I really do believe that the biggest releases are still on the horizon. There have been rumblings of some very prominent mod authors actually collaborating to create some larger projects to release via this, but a lot of that is just based off how much actual interest there is. These mod authors start making pretty good to even great money using this, I imagine we're going to see a lot more big content for it. But of course, this is almost certainly coming to Starfield as well. To end off 2023, Bethesda shared an end-of-year update around Starfield and their plans for 2024. They describe how new updates will be dropping for Starfield about every 6 weeks, with the first major update coming in February. And for their 2024 plans, they describe adding things like city maps, so hopefully we'll get these uninformative, crude maps replaced. There's going to be new ways to travel, which definitely sounds hopeful. I expect them to add some type of new jetpack that'll make navigating across planets far quicker and easier. New ways to customize your ship, with them specifically mentioning things like ship decorations, new ship building options, and more. So likely giving you the ability to properly place around some junk and just cosmetic additions on your spaceship, but also likely a variety of the other parts you could find in game. There's been quite a few mods actually implementing these, and even some mods adding in full-on space station customizability. New gameplay options to further adjust difficulty, but it sounds like as opposed to just being a straightforward hardcore or greater difficulty mode, it'll give you further degrees of customization over the difficulty of the game, with them describing easy ways to customize carrying capacity, cargo access distance, ship damage, vendor credits, how you suffer afflictions, new survival mechanics, and more. So as opposed to a new difficulty option, it's almost like you'll be able to create your own difficulty for the game, leaning more into survival or easier mechanics depending on what you'd like to play. And this too would be a great addition to the game and give food a more functional usage. But the last two things are definitely the biggest, with official mod support with the launch of Creations and the first story expansion with Shattered Space. So to fairly keep expectations in check, these are their plans for all of 2024, at least that's how it's been described thus far. That new difficulty mode may not come until this summer, and the new ways to travel could be a fall release. But I think I know why that is happening. It's been pretty clear for a while now that Starfield is getting relatively small updates. If you look at what's fixed for, let's say, Baldur's Gate 3 in a month, and then compare to what's getting fixed for Starfield in a month, there is quite the discrepancy, but I think there is an explanation for what's going on here. Starfield went through this insane all-hands-on-deck QA process. It's why things like the Fallout 4 next-gen version and even Skyrim creations were delayed. They literally ran out of QA testers because so many were working on Starfield. As a result, Starfield released as one of the least buggy Bethesda Game Studios releases ever, and I think Bethesda saw that a bunch of reviewers mentioned that and were like, okay, great, now let's work on DLC and or paid mods. So as a result, it seems like the team continuing to update Starfield has been relatively small. But from this recent Wired interview, we had Todd Howard confirm that there are still 250 developers working on Starfield in some capacity. It really doesn't seem like these updates are the result of work of 250 developers, so what I hope's going on is a lot of people are working on DLC or even this new mod system. I made a video about this a bit ago, but one of the big issues facing Starfield right now was how unmoddable it was. Despite many public mentions of it being a modder's paradise after I talked to many of the most prominent mod authors working on the game, it was described how many of the new systems, aka basically all of the new systems, were designed without moddability in mind, making the modding process for Starfield far more delicate and difficult. And at this point, numerous mod authors have come out raising their concerns about issues with this game and how moddable it'll be going forward. So of course, this can be fixed, but it will require quite a bit of work from Bethesda. In the past, they described mods coming in early 2023, and they did reiterate that early next year listing in their end-of-year update post, going on to describe how Starfield will be getting its own exporter and you'll have access to a new creation kit. And as another small piece of evidence that this is coming to Starfield relatively soon, they also just filed a new trademark for Bethesda Game Studios creations right at the end of 2023. This doesn't really mean a ton one way or another, but it definitely seems to be at least some indication that they have grand plans for this program applying to multiple of their games. But either way, to get mods working on the same degree as they have with past games will require a bit of work from Bethesda, so perhaps a considerable chunk of developers are working on moddability, while another considerable chunk are working on the DLC. And I think those are the two big things to look out for in 2024. The continued updates to Starfield are definitely interesting, but mod support and the DLC seem to be commanding the bulk of the development efforts, and it makes sense. Mods are almost certainly going to have paid mods released at the same time. I mean, have you noticed how every single time Bethesda mentions Starfield mods, they also call them creations, aka the new naming used for this new Skyrim paid and free mod system? I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it's coming to Starfield right away. And with Starfield having such a long QA period, it definitely seems like work on this DLC could have begun quite a bit earlier this time around, so perhaps we're even playing it by this summer. So even just between Starfield getting official mods, Starfield getting a big expansion, and of course a potential Oblivion remaster or remake, Bethesda's going to have a pretty stacked and content-rich 2024. And if each of those releases are segmented by just a couple of months, we could be eating good, having new releases every couple of months from this company. And perhaps we'll be learning more about this all very, very soon. Right around this time last year, rumors were flying of a new Xbox event debuting. Xbox had just skipped the Game Awards in its entirety, and shortly thereafter, in late January, the Developer Direct happened. And looking ahead at just how much Bethesda and Xbox have slated for 2023, I wouldn't be shocked to see this return in some capacity. If anything, I think a showcase of Starfield's DLC could end up fitting really nicely at a Developer Direct. But if this is going to be happening in late January to early February, I would obviously expect an Xbox event announcement in just the next couple of weeks. And even just as I was filming this video, we got a new leak about the 2024 Developer Direct. This coming from Spanish insider Ecstasis, who has correctly predicted things in the past. They got the Redfall release date right and almost got the Baldur's Gate 3 release date correct. Where they do report on Twitter, Xbox is setting the stage for a new Developer Direct event. Following in the footsteps of the successful start of 2023, at this upcoming event, expect fascinating presentations with news about titles already announced, giving players a look behind the curtain, some of the most anticipated projects, Hellblade, Towerborn, etc. But here comes the main dish. I am told that during this event, we could witness a new shadow drop or surprise release, with the game being available at the same event or even several weeks later. It may not be exactly the same as the Hi-Fi Rush case, but we would have something very similar from a game with a close release date. More info here. And in the attached image, we could see the same exact style and format as the original Developer Direct teaser. This time around, we could see 4 developers with Ninja Theory, Stoic Studios, Obsidian, and Oxide Games, with the Developer Direct itself apparently happening on January 25th. So overall, the fact that an event like this could be coming is pretty likely. I think this leak can be taken pretty seriously in that regard, but when it comes to some of these more explicit and concrete details, obviously something like this can pretty easily be photoshopped, and it would take this aspect with a bit more of a grain of salt. But of course, the interesting aspect about this leak is all 4 of these studios studios have games supposedly coming in 2024, but none of them actually have a release date. At least not a release date beyond just 2024. Stoic Studios is working on Towerborn. Ninja Theory, of course, is working on Hellblade 2, which we just saw some of at the Game Awards 2023. Oxide Games is working on Ara History Untold, and of course Obsidian is working on Avowed. If there really is going to be a shadow drop from one of these games, that could be pretty exciting, especially if it's Avowed. But to me, it seems like the most likely candidate is going to either be Towerborn or Ara History Untold as far as shadow dropping goes. But even further, we have all of this Fallout news also coming in 2023 from Bethesda. The Fallout TV show is dropping on April 12th, and we just learned that the Fallout 4 Next Gen version was delayed. Perhaps these two things are completely unrelated to one another, but I'm guessing they're not. And we could see a huge batch of Fallout news with the TV show release and Next Gen version also releasing right around the same time in the first half of 2024. I fully expect Bethesda to have some kind of presence at PAX East to showcase and promote this, and we also have the Fallout 76 map expansion coming at some point this year. Fallout 76 seems to almost have this dual team development cycle going on, where Bethesda Game Studios works heavily on some things, like this new Atlantic City expedition, and Double 11, one of the support studios, works more heavily on some other things, like this upcoming map expansion and previously Nuka World on Tour. So with that in mind, if they really are using different developers for different projects on Fallout 76, it wouldn't shock me if this big map expansion releases a little bit earlier in the year and not in December like they typically drop things. But either way, there's going to be a healthy amount of content on the Fallout front to also add into the mix between all of this. And then there's just the mobile game. Back in 2018, Bethesda said they always want to be working on some kind of mobile project, just like their AAA releases. And last year, they technically did release a new mobile game. The Elder Scrolls Castles was released in beta, and honestly without any mention officially or even really any fanfare. I wouldn't be shocked if many of you have never heard of this game until right now because, yeah, they just dropped it on the Play Store one day. It was limited in the number of signups because, again, it is in a closed beta right now. But thus far, it seems like it's going to be very similar to Fallout Shelter, and generally players are enjoying it, so perhaps we see a more proper release of this at some point in 2024. But even further, there have been mentions of a proper Bethesda Game Studios mobile division found, and Todd Howard mentioned in an interview last year how he is excited for their upcoming mobile project. Maybe this is Spy Team, some kind of mobile project they've had in the works for a while now, or maybe it's something else entirely. It could technically be the Elder Scrolls Castles, we really don't know. That's kind of a weird situation with Bethesda and their mobile projects. They're always just kind of there in the background, and perhaps 2024 is the year we finally start to see some of these drop. But that also leaves us with the big question of what's next. I think 2024 will be an incredibly telling time for Bethesda, and specifically the new Bethesda under Xbox. They finally got Starfield out the door. We're kind of transitioning into the first full game being developed under Xbox's leadership. If you look at this roadmap that came from Bethesda, and even look at some of the FTC testimony that was made, it could be that the Elder Scrolls 6 is targeting a release in 2026. Now, Phil Spencer has testified to the contrary, so we kind of have competing narratives here. But if the Elder Scrolls 6 is actually coming out in 2026, could we actually start to see some more teasing or at least mentions of it in 2024? I actually think there's a decent chance we do, and one of the big reasons is Game Pass. Xbox has this interesting business model where it's not necessarily that you want a bunch of people to buy your game on release as much as you want a bunch of people to stay subscribed to Game Pass forever. That recurrent and consistent revenue is incredibly valuable. So I wouldn't be shocked if, as a result of that, we start to see Bethesda talk about some of their upcoming games even a bit earlier. That's not to say that I think we're getting a new Elder Scrolls 6 trailer this year, but instead I wouldn't be shocked if at a lot of these other interviews that are going on around some of their other releases, it is actually talked about and mentioned. I wouldn't be shocked to hear Todd Howard give us a couple of one-liners about what's going on with the Elder Scrolls 6 and basically just status updates on the project. But even beyond just Bethesda Game Studios, 2024 has the potential to be a giant year for the company of Bethesda overall. As I mentioned earlier, this new Indiana Jones game that Todd Howard is executive producing is likely to get revealed and maybe even released this year. It found itself as coming a year after Starfield in that leaked roadmap. But far more telling is this quote from Todd Howard in a recent interview where he says to to ask him about Indiana Jones next year, aka ask him about it in 2024. I think that's a pretty big indication that at the very least we'll see a trailer or some gameplay of whatever this project will end up being, but I wouldn't be shocked if Indiana Jones is one of the major showcases at the summer showcase for 2024. But in a very similar vein, we also have this absolutely gigantic ZeniMax Online Studios game. For the last decade, this company has really just had ESO, but quietly in the background they have been chipping away at some kind of other MMO. We don't know much right now, but it seems plausible that 2024 could finally be the year that this new MMO is revealed, and it really does seem like this is going to be a very large game. ZeniMax Online Studios opened up several new studios while working on this project, and it's been underway for quite a few years now. Honestly, I thought they were going to reveal it last year along with Starfield, but maybe Starfield just took up so much of a presence that it's been pushed to 2024 along with potentially some other content. And then of course, if you're just looking at Xbox broadly and you are an RPG fan, you also have things like Clockwork Revolution and Avowed, which right now Avowed's release date is at some point in 2024. Clockwork Revolution looks a bit more exciting to me, but as of right now doesn't have a release date. I expect we'll get some kind of gameplay at this year's summer showcase or one of the major showcases, and who knows, maybe it comes out in late 2024. That'd be awesome. With Avowed kind of having the opposite situation. A lot of people loved what they saw initially, but then with this follow-up gameplay we got last year, a lot of people are fairly disappointed in Avowed and actually didn't really like what they saw. So if anything, I wouldn't be shocked if Avowed gets another bit of an internal rework, and we'll likely hear more or see more from it this year, but I could see it getting delayed into 2025, or at least that definitely wouldn't shock me. With all that in mind, you could hopefully see why Bethesda really does have a super stacked 2024. There's going to be a lot of content coming out from this company this year, whether that just be teasers and trailers or actual releases, who knows, but it feels like so much of what we expected in 2023 ended up getting pushed into 2024. But even with the gigantic release of Starfield last year, it seems like 2024 could end up superseding it as an even busier year for this company. And if you're interested in finding out more, check out this video where I dive far deeper on some of the leaks and rumors surrounding these new Fallout games.